All right. Hello, everyone. I'm seeing Cayman Islands, Toronto, Chicago, St. Catharines, Pittsburgh. Amazing people from all over, it seems. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Already about 170 people already just jumped on, and we're going to give people a couple more moments. But what else we got here? Texas, Aurora, Vancouver, London, Ontario, Okanagan. I'm very, very jealous. Um, Awesome. So as we let people filter in, hello, everyone. My name is Rob Catalano, I'm Chief Engagement Officer at WorkTango, and excited to have you all join our WorkTango webinar series. I am in Toronto, Vicenza, Italy. I'd like to be there. You can probably tell soon I'm in Toronto because I have construction right beside me. A huge crane is going to be flying, so don't worry, I'm safe. It's not going to hit my building. But excited to have you all here. Just about 200 folks joining already. But I did want to do some quick housekeeping before we got started. So a couple of things. Really excited to talk about this topic on talent retention in the hybrid and remote workplace. And before I introduce our speaker, one thing to note is that, we want this to be an interactive conversation. So just wanted to let people know if you have any issues, you could send a chat to either just the panelists or if you have something in terms of, from an audio perspective or questions you have about the webinar itself, feel free to use the chat. We're also going to be using the Q&A today as well. So if you have questions, obviously our speaker will be looking at those items, but I'll be the voice of all of you as well, trying to infuse that into the conversation. So this group I'm not too worried about. They're pretty interactive, and I know it'll be a good conversation, but definitely use those two items. One other thing is we will be leveraging polls today. So, definitely provide your feedback. It'll spark some interesting conversations above and beyond what our speaker will be discussing away as well. Now, a couple of things, just kind of my thoughts. This world of hybrid and remote workplace, we know we're talking a lot about now, but this idea and concept around, trying to just navigate through it or think about a hybrid workplace, I think is where a lot of organizations are today. But the idea about the future of your talent retention, the future of how you look at recruiting, inspiring the workplace in this type of environment, I think needs to change, which is why this is, again, a really, really important topic. Because the reality is, a lot of us are going to be in this type of environment. Now, not this one, right? You are all way more engaged in the conversation, but this has this stigma right now, right? In terms of what remote and hybrid workplaces look and feel like. But again, it works for a lot of organizations. A lot of companies are going that route. And because it's becoming a new expectation of the modern workplace, I'm very excited to kind of have Chris talk about the topic today and what he's seeing in his world. Now, what I thought was really interesting is that maybe it's fitting because of the day we're having this webinar, but if you were to ask someone what this looks like, it looks like a disengaged workforce, and that's probably what WeWork CEO thinks remote work looks and feels like. If you haven't seen this yet today, there's an interesting article around WeWork CEO saying people who are most comfortable working from home are the least engaged with their jobs. I think it's a little self-serving in terms of what he's getting at there, but definitely I kind of have a little discussion going on LinkedIn right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I just thought it was fitting, the topic today, and this pops up on my newsfeed. Thanks, Stephen, for popping it in there. So that being said, I wanted to kind of introduce our speaker today. And Chris, first off, big thank you for being here. I'm really excited for the conversation. If you don't know much, Kathy, I won't be applying at WeWork. So Chris is the founder and CEO of People G2, and they're a fully remote organization, and they are routinely ranked as one of the best places to work and listed in one of Inc.'s 5,000 fastest growing companies 5 different times. Chris is an international keynote speaker, ranked #1 by Forbes, a top 50 global thought leader in 2021, a company culture expert and consultant on remote work. And, he's read all those books that are behind him in that image. He's a really, really well-read guy. But Chris's first book, The Power of Company Culture, was a bestseller. And his second book is actually coming out May 26th, but you can actually pre-order it now. I've had the pleasure of looking at some of the original chapters and being involved. So again, there's some really powerful things. And my hope is to learn through your expertise and kind of wisdom of what you've done in the past into the conversation today, Chris. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of hand it over to you and I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and a big thank you for being here.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me come here today. Let me just pull up my my screen. There we go. And welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. I think we're really going to talk about something. You know, it's so funny how we spent months and months and months talking about remote work, and now the sort of the new topic, of course, is hybrid. And it's really important, and it's going to be one of the biggest challenges. If you are a hybrid organization, it is the most difficult of all the scenarios for you to be successful. Fully remote and fully in the office are way easier than hybrid. But we're going to help you today. And there's some really key things that we need to be thinking about for our people if we want to retain them and if we want to attract better people as well. So as Rob mentioned, that is my book, Remote Work. It comes out towards the end of the month. And if you would like to maybe get more than one copy, we're doing a special promotion for anyone who gets 10 or more copies, maybe like for the whole team or the company. But WorkTango and 49 other companies are giving away free stuff if you do that. If you buy 10 or more, there's the website to do that. If you're just a one book kind of person, cool, no problem. You can get it on Amazon or wherever you buy your books online. But we really try to put together very practical field guide, Bible-esque content for you in this book. This is not a theory. This is not a, oh, well, remote work is great, go figure it out. No, this is like the nuts and bolts, the real stuff you need to make this work. But before we start, I want to kind of back up for a second. I want to put us in the right frame of mind here. And this is really, I think, where remote and hybrid work starts. What if tomorrow you're going to show up to work and we're going to roll a die a few hundred times, and we're going to basically reconstruct your entire identity? What your gender is, how you identify, what your name is, what your race is, what your ethnic background is, where you live, I mean, all of these things, right? What's your sexual identity? All of these things we're going to randomly choose for you, okay? And tomorrow you're going to show up at a brand new job, at your job now, but as a brand new employee. So consider that, okay? Is your company prepared? Will that employee do well no matter who they are, no matter how they identify, and what sort of different variables we might have come up with in that rolling the random, the total randomness of a die? Will your organization be able to accept and welcome and help that person thrive and succeed? Very few organizations, if they're being honest with themselves, can be a great fit for everybody. Maybe they can be for certain people, right? But in a hybrid and remote environment, I believe we have the biggest opportunity to be as accepting and be as open and as connected and collaborative for the most amount of people possible. If you're physically disabled and going into an office is really a challenge for you, but you're a fantastic programmer, you're a great salesperson, but you have a physical limitation, right? Now, with this strategy, employers are far more likely to be able to employ you and to have you be successful. If you're someone that is taking care of a sick spouse, or you have kids, or your family life doesn't really allow for you to be consistently in an office from 9 to 5, but you're a fantastic employee. You're exactly who that employer is looking for, right? We can create the right environment, right, to be successful. So I want to kind of dive into the first part today. We're going to send out a poll question. And I'm kind of curious as to how has communication changed at your company since COVID? Has it increased? Has it decreased? Has it stayed the same? Or has it just been a crazy roller coaster, right? I'm really interested in kind of knowing what it's been like at your company. Because what we're seeing is that communication is really a huge key here. So we'll kind of wait here. We'll see what the results are once it's closed. I'm not sure, Stephen or Rob, when that's going to happen.
Yeah, we just had about 70% voted. I'm going to close it in a couple seconds.
Cool. Drum roll, please. So it's increased. For most of you, communication has increased. And how awesome is that, right? I'm sure that it increased for a lot of you because it needed to, because there was so much going on. But what I find is that when we are remote and we're in a hybrid scenario, that we're forced to communicate more. We can't just walk down the hall and tell somebody something. We can't just push it, into these informal pockets. We have to be more intentional. Now, today I'm going to talk to you about some of the really important information that came out of a very key McKinsey study. It came out just a few weeks ago. And there's some wonderful data points in there that may help you in understanding what's important for your organization, for your people, again, for your talent retention and talent attraction strategies. In this sort of McKinsey study, most organizations have not clearly communicated a vision for post-pandemic work. So this is really important. Even though you're saying in your organizations you saw more communication, in the average organization, right, 40% said they've not communicated what this is going to look like, and 28% have vaguely communicated what this is going to look like. And to be somewhat fair, they may not know, right? They may be figuring it out. We've tried to reopen and we've gone backwards. What's really important here is that we are communicating what we think is going to happen, what our vision is right now. With that, we want to put an asterisk there. You want to have a caveat. We may have to change our mind. We may have to pivot. This may not stick. We can't control what the government is going to do or what COVID's going to do, but we need to be really upfront with our people. We need to really make sure that they understand what we think is going to happen going forward, even if we change our mind. So make sure that you are bringing that up as much as possible, because again, most people are saying they're not getting this vision. So maybe communication's gone up about day-to-day stuff, but communication about what post-pandemic work is going to look like is really key to keep your people, because if they don't have the answers, if they don't know what you're thinking, they're going to fill that in with information that they can get from other sources, their brain, their fears, what some other employee made up, right? So we need to be very clear about that. Second poll I want to ask is, how big of a risk do you think it is to return to normal for talent? How big of a risk do you think it is if we all just sort of return to normal? Is it little to none? Some issues to deal with? Is it huge? Or maybe just do you not know? That's okay too. What does that risk look like for your company? We've seen all sorts of organizations say we're bringing everyone back and we're just going back to normal. We don't care. We've seen organizations pay lip service to it and say, well, we want to hear what everyone has to think. And everyone says, well, I pretty much like this hybrid or remote thing. I'll come in the office a few days, but I like the flexibility. And then the CFO says, well, that's not how we did it in my day. And then they just push it back. So let's see here. Some issues and huge, right? Huge risk. Everyone's really seeing a lot of risk and a lot of issues in returning back to normal. So think about how much fear, how much insecurity, how much anxiety this is causing your people on a regular basis. According to McKinsey, a lot of people are willing to switch jobs if you're not willing to have flexible work, hybrid and remote. So here we have US. We have which I think, if I remember correctly, Canada was actually a part of that. We have a lot of Canadians on today. But so it depends on where your people are. You can see some slight differences. But about 30% of employees say they are likely to switch jobs if they have to return to work full-time, if it's totally back to how it was before. 30%. And there was actually a drill down into that. Your top talent, your best people are a part of that 30%. That's pretty scary. So just from a talent retention standpoint, if you go back to senior leadership and you say, listen, maybe you don't want hybrid, maybe you don't want remote, maybe you want to go back to normal, we're going to lose 30% of our people if we do that. If I was your senior leader and I heard that, I would give me pause right there. So this is a talent retention strategy, if nothing else, even though I think it's the better way to work, even though I think that we have a higher engagement when we allow flexibility. It's a talent retention strategy. this is a really key area that we need to think about. So communicating that vision and making sure that vision is aligned to allowing this type of work. All right, poll number 3 is, what is a good balance for hybrid work? So we've talked about, is hybrid good, but is it anything goes? Is it you can come in whenever you want, and if you're going to go 2 weeks and working from home, and then maybe you need to be in the office a little bit, is it a consistent 1 to 2 days? Are we putting expectations on people? Is it majority of the time in the office, so 3 days? Or is it mostly in the office and every once in a while if you want to have a Friday work from home, right? Or you have an issue every once in a while. What does that look like for you guys? What are you thinking that hybrid work will be? My company is 100% remote, so I'm a little skewed. I'm like, everyone stay home all the time. But I'm interested, if you're going to mix it, what is everyone thinking? So 1 to 2 to 3, right? That's pretty common. And I would say that's been pretty consistent in what we've seen, that it's, 2 to 3 days is pretty normal for what people are thinking. Well, according to the McKinsey study, majority of the employees would like to work from home at least 3 days of work. So that 1 to 2 day range is actually aligns more with what your employees want. Over 50% of employees say they want to work at least 3 days from home. Pretty significant. Of course, that is a little bit different if you look at the different areas in the world. But if we're using US and Canada really as our basis here, half of your people want a majority of the time to be at home and or not in the office, right? If they're going to be out in the field or in the office. Again, we want to think about our strategy, and we're going to communicate that vision. But if our vision is contrary to what we're seeing here, you're going to have to be prepared to lose some people, some good people. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to have to retool how you're going to work. So if hybrid to you was 3 days in the office, that's not what people are expecting. They're expecting 1 to 2 days in the office and the rest of the time working outside of the office. All right, last poll question, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies here to help you with your hybrid work, is what are employees most worried about? What do you think your employees are most worried about around a hybrid situation? Is it work-life balance? Is it loss of community, reduced collaboration, or reduced personal well-being? What do you think that they're most worried about? Looks like we have some good chats going in here. And don't forget, if you have a question, to throw it in the Q&A, and we'll try to address it for sure. We will be getting to some of the practical things here in a minute. And let's see what we got here. Work-life balance. Work-life balance. What are they most worried about? Work-life balance. That's interesting. So let's see where we landed here. So according to this McKinsey study, they definitely they're hoping. So this is an interesting graph here. They're hoping for a better work-life balance. They're hoping for better flexibility, and that they can this can better create their better implications for compensation, and that they can have increased focused on well-being. Where their fear is, right, is that they'll have a worse work-life balance. So those of you that voted there, well done. You're right on target.
There was just a question that came up around defining what you mean by work-life balance, or potentially what they did in the study.
So work-life balance generally means that you have flexibility, autonomy, and boundaries. So the flexibility means that you can work as much as that job allows when you want to work, right? So that you're not fixated to where I have to be on my computer from 9 to 5, or I have to be in the office from 9 to 5. So that's the flexibility part. And the autonomy part is I can mold my day based on what's happening in my life with what's happening at work. And then the last part is really being able to create the right boundaries so that we're not overworking. It's not like, well, I'm at home and so I don't know when to shut off. I don't know when to we have natural boundaries when we drive into an office, right? We drive our car or we get on the train or whatever we do. When we get to work, we know that's when we start. When we leave work and we head home, that's when we know we stop. For most of us, we have clear boundaries. We lose those when we're home. So there's concern there as well that people will overwork and that they'll be on all the time and they'll always be answering emails and always answering their Slack or whatever it is. So there's sort of a three-part there that kind of goes into that question, into that. Great question. So we had this gentleman named Dr. Aaron Lee from Walden University come in, and he asked me, hey, can I come in and study your organization? Since you guys are 100% remote, we're studying all these remote companies, and we want to come in and check on your people for a year. And I said, sure. A year later, he came back to me and said, hey, I have all the results. And I went, I'm sorry, who are you? I had forgotten who he was. I'd forgotten I'd given permission. He'd been working with my people. And so he'd been talking to them, but he had some really cool outcomes that I think tie into what we just talked about. So what he found out was that in traditional organizations, when you're working all in an office, personal connection is the most important factor, and personal satisfaction is what people spend most of their time sort of worrying about and being and controlling and fulfilling themselves with, right? So it's your work friends, it's your boss, it's your sense of fulfillment in the work that you're doing. You have a personal satisfaction, right? That you achieve something. Family environment, that people get along. Your professional satisfaction, all these things are important, but professional satisfaction, not quite as important. Social interaction, and then work-life balance was relatively unimportant to the traditional office space, right? Again, because we have those clear boundaries on when we work, when we start, when we stop. But what they found was that in remote organizations, it was a complete opposite. The hierarchy of needs completely shifted. Remote and hybrid employees realize that work-life balance is key, and that is where they get their fulfillment. So the fact that they can go pick up their child from school, the fact that they can run to the doctor without having to take a day off, the fact that they can take the dog for a walk on their lunch break, right? This work-life balance is so important to them that the ability to manage their own time, right, is important. That social interaction is important to feeling like they connect with their people, and that professional satisfaction. So they have the autonomy to get their job done, but actually achieving something, professional satisfaction sits in there. Personal connection now being last. Just the having work buddies, having your friends at work, getting that you get that connection elsewhere, right? Away from work. Personal connection is still important, but not important for feeling accomplished at work. So work-life balance, social interaction, and professional satisfaction suddenly become the drivers for people. This aligned up exactly in my company and hundreds of other remote organizations he studied. And he did a really cool paper on this. And so it changes for people. If they're going into an office every day, they have a different set of wants, needs, and desires, right? Their sort of hierarchy of needs is different than people who are working flexibly, hybrid, and from home. So think about that as you are really kind of putting your strategies together, as you're thinking about how we're going to retain people and what's important. If you're going to allow some flexible work, you're going to need to be able to do this. So how do we do this, right? How do we create the right environments for our people to retain them? So I want to talk to you about a couple key things here today that I find are really important for hybrid teams to work well together, for hybrid organizations to excel. We learned some really fantastic things from Google. They've done a lot of research around what makes a great team, and they've put that out there for free to people. There's a great website that's got a lot of their research in it. And they went back and they wanted to understand, why did some of their teams do really well and why did some of their teams fail? And they wondered, was it 2 extroverts and introvert? Was it 5 marketing people and 2 customer service people? Was it all male, all females? Was it an equal amount of gender? All these types of things. And they found out none of that mattered. What mattered was that the teams were self-forming, that the people decided that they raised their hand and said, I want to be on this team. Now, if you take a job as a salesperson, you have essentially agreed to be on the sales team, right? But what I mean by that is that if you're going to have a special project, hey, we're going to go and research a new CRM. Who would like, instead of the CEO saying, you, go be on this team, you say to the organization, we want to go find our new CRM. Who would like to be on this team? And it's really fascinating to see who raises their hand. You have people from all different departments. Maybe they have experience in this. Maybe at a different job, they did this. Maybe one of them used to work for a CRM company, right? So they have a real insider knowledge. So really being self-forming is super important. 5 to 7 members is key. Your team should not be any bigger than 7 and should not be any smaller than 5. Less than 5, you just don't have enough help and momentum to really get going. More than 7, it's just too, it's like herding cats. It's just too hard to do. Jeff Bezos has a great saying that if 2 large pizzas won't feed your team, you have too many people there. So 5 to 7, I find 5 is like perfect for me, but 6 to 7 is tolerable. And that's the right amount to figure things out. And then most importantly, you need to establish these unique norms before you start. Okay. Now at my company, each team has a totally different answer to this 3 subset of questions. They're self-forming. They have 5 to 7 people, but then they have a unique way. Each of them have decided to do this. So the first one is for any team, it could be an infinite team, like a sales team, a customer service team, right? It could be a finite team, like, hey, we're going to go do this one thing in this one time. Okay. You have to decide, what does success look like? Now for a sales team, what's our quota? What are we trying? What's our sales goal? Things like that. But if you're going to go look for a new CRM, you might need to figure out, well, will the sales team use it? Does it integrate with our other platforms? What are the things we need to know to be successful? It's really important. I would say most of you probably do that all the time, but it's important we need to do it. The second thing we need to do is decide, why would we fail? What things would happen if we failed? Talk about failure before you start your projects, before your team begins a new thing, before they get going. Why would we fail? You get those things flushed out, you get people talking. Now we can figure out how to avoid those, how to counter them, how to put things in place so we don't get into that position. And then last but not least, certainly I think the most important norm is to decide how we're going to deal with conflict. This is where your teams mess up. This is where your hybrid teams will get all screwy and fail to take off, is if they haven't decided on conflict. I'll tell you that my research team, they just take a vote. It's like democracy. They just take a vote, and if there's an even number that day, then the senior leader makes the final call. Other teams, my sales team, it's a sales leader makes the final call. On my customer service team, they will talk it out until they can come to a conclusion. They want a consensus. So they all have a different conflict resolution strategy. I have another team that they'll bring me in if they can't agree. They'll bring in another senior person who's a third party to make the final decision. They all have a difference. And then once they have a decision, they all have agreed to support it no matter what. That they will move forward unless new information comes forward. So this is really important, that our teams know how to function if we want them to be successful in the next round that we're going to go with. The next thing that we need to do is to make sure that we have a new way to check in with our teams. When we're in an office and everyone's there together, we can kind of pick up on body language and sort of different things happening to see maybe that person is happy, maybe that person is sad, maybe they're angry, maybe there's something going on with them. But we show up on a video call and then we click off, and then we don't pick up on some of those cues that happen in between meetings. So we want to slow down and connect with our people. We do this on any meeting that's 30 minutes or more. I don't find it's very effective for quick, short meetings, but 30 minutes or more, and no more than once a day. We will do what we call as bonding. So how does bonding work? And this little exercise will get you connected with your people in a way you've never been able to do before. This will give you emotional intelligence. If you didn't ever, people say that and you're like, well, how am I supposed to be more emotionally intelligent? This exercise will get you started. At the beginning of the meeting, ask everyone to go around the room and answer this question. How are you showing up right now? You might hear things are great. I'm really excited. You might hear, I haven't slept in 3 days. I have a newborn at home. I got a new puppy. I didn't sleep all night. It was whining. You might hear, I just found out my grandmother passed away. You might hear something really important and tragic, right? And as an opportunity for us to immediately stop and connect with that person, or to help them, or maybe cancel the meeting if we don't need to have it, or excuse them from the meeting if they're really struggling, right? This is a way for us to figure out what's really going on. At the end of the meeting, leave a couple minutes before the end and ask everyone, how are you leaving this meeting? This is such a better way than, hey, is everyone good? Everyone's okay? And then, or any final questions? I mean, who's going to ask a question when we're 30 seconds before ending and then start a whole nother conversation? Nobody. So how are you leaving? This tends to be a question that gets answered as the employee, right? The first one is more of a human being question. Second one's more of an employee question. And so you hear things like, this was a great meeting. I feel like I understand now. I'm still really confused. I don't think the client's going to like this solution. I really feel like we need to get IT involved before we move forward. You're going to get information that helps you gut check, was this the meeting I thought we had? Is everyone on the same page? Are we really connected here? Do we need to meet again? Do we need to bring other people in to help us? It really sheds a lot of light, so you can start to realize, geez, Jason said he's not really sure about this, and I noticed the whole meeting he was really quiet. On the next meeting we have, I'm going to have to pull him out a little more. I'm going to draw him out because clearly he's got reservations. This is how we can be more emotionally intelligent, by being able to just sort of go through this exercise. Now, it's really important, though, that you go last. The most senior people go last. So as the CEO of my company, I would never go first. I would go around and we would ask my people and ask the senior people to go last, and I would always go the last person. If I show up and say, I'm really happy, I'm really sad, I'm really frustrated, my people are going to feel pressure to not say anything that's going to counter that. Okay? I want to hear where they're at. I want to share. And if they are struggling, no one cares about how I feel. It's my job as the boss to stop and focus on them and not even share anymore. We'll just stop. Wow, you're struggling. How can we help you? Or can we let you be excused from this meeting? Or can we reschedule? If you're clearly, we have people struggling right now, this is not the right time. This is how we can connect and bond with our people and really create better connection, communication, and hopefully retention of your best people in a hybrid environment. Now, some things I want to kind of challenge you on that maybe it could be a little controversial. So I would like you all to stop having one-on-one or one-on-two meetings as much as you can, as much as possible. Now, if you think about a meeting and you say, who should be here? Who else should be on this call? I have a call with Rob today. Who else should be on this call? If I say nobody, because there's no one else involved, no one else needs to be there, or maybe it's a really sensitive conversation, sure, have your one-on-one meeting. Or this is a coaching call, this is a goals call, fine. But if I say, well, Stephen's going to have to be on this webinar we're planning, we should have Stephen on the call. Okay, great. And maybe we should have somebody, think about who else might need to be on this call. Have more calls, 5 to 7 people. This moves information quickly. This gets people talking. This gets information around faster. And by having that more people on a call initially, we are saving ourselves time and we are eliminating meetings later on. The more one-on-one meetings you have in a remote and hybrid organization setup, the slower your company goes, the less information gets passed around, and the less transparency we create. Because it is so difficult to be having one-on-ones with one person at a time and to get anything done in your organization. Instead, bring 5 or 7 people together. They will have better ideas, more information, right? Then you and that one other person. Again, I know there's certain meetings that have to be one-on-ones, but in general, for your average meeting, try to expand that and you'll find that your communication goes a lot better. Stop having long video meetings. No one likes them. People get tired. No one has realized that you can just tell everyone, hold on, I need to go to the bathroom, right? We're in a traditional office. You have no problem just standing up in the meeting and saying, excuse me, I need to go in real quick. But on Zoom, for some reason, we all just get stuck there. So shorten your meetings, 30 minutes, 45 minutes if you have to have longer meetings. Give yourself built-in breaks to get up, stand, use the restroom, get something to drink, get more coffee, right? If you've installed a coffee pot on your desk, you're clearly your meetings are way too long, right? So we want to try to create smaller, more frequent opportunities to connect and collaborate. Make sure we are curating our meetings. And when I mean curating our meetings, I mean develop meeting types and have very strict rules that everyone knows and be the meeting dictator. You will find that people are happier if they know what the rules are, how to act, what's expected of them, and it is being reinforced by leadership. Some of the very simple ways that we can curate meetings is to make sure we always start on time, to make sure we always end early. Now, at my company, if you show up late, you're more than a minute into the meeting and you show up late, you have to sing. Now that's just our funny way in our company. That's a funny thing we do. It's not meant to be mean spirited or bullying or anything. It's a fun thing we do. For your organization, if that's not right, then find something else. Have them read terrible poetry. I don't know. And then end early. If we end early, we take advantage of what's called Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says if we set an hour to do something, we tend to fill up with things to take an hour to do something. So if your goal is to end early, we have a 30-minute meeting, can we end at 20 minutes? Can we end at 25? And everyone knows that we're going to condense. We're going to be more efficient. We're going to talk more succinctly. We're not going to tell silly stories or talk about our kids and vacation and like add in all this junk we don't need to add in, right? Our goal is to get in, talk about what's important, and end early and give people the gift of time. Give them that work-life balance. It's a really important strategy. And then no agenda, no meeting. Your agenda item might be one item, it might be 5 items. But if I get a meeting request and there's no agenda, I immediately decline it. No agenda, no meeting. I think I had someone say, no agenda, no attendee. You got to be really strict about this. We can't just be showing up to meet on stuff that we don't even know what's expected. For anybody who shows up to meetings without an agenda, I guarantee I know what happens. Everyone shows up, no one knew exactly what they were supposed to do, and there's a whole lot of, oh, I'm going to have to go find out, I'll go pull that file, I got to do that research. And when we basically had a meeting to talk about how we need to have another meeting. If we have an agenda and we know what's expected, we can show up as prepared as possible to hopefully, again, eliminate future meetings and get it done now. Now, it looks like we have a few questions, Rob. Do we want to try to answer some of these?
Yeah, just popping on to ask. There was 2 that were very similar in kind of in concept, and one was around surprised at the suggestion to stop one-on-ones, as you know, as that this individual thinks it's really important. Not everyone's comfortable with larger groups. And another comment kind of was around, what about professional development, growth combos? So maybe you can add some color or light to those 2 questions around kind of the controversial stop having one-on-one meetings on your screen.
Yeah. So yes, there are meetings you have to have one-on-one. So I get that. Like you're going to have a call where you're going to be working with someone, or maybe they're not meeting their sales goal and you're going to help them out. I mean, there are those situations where we need to have one-on-ones. But I will tell you, so here's a really good example of when the light bulb went on for me. I have a woman who works for me, and her spouse is in the military, and she was stationed overseas. She has 2 young children, and she came to me and says, I'm really struggling right now. You know, I'm working full time. I've got 2 kids. It's COVID. They're not going to school. You know, really struggling to kind of figure out what I'm supposed to do, right? And she's having this one-on-one meeting with me. And I said, you know what? I've never been a single parent, temporary single parent. My wife and I adopted our kids older. I've never had 2 kids under 4 years old. Like I've never had to be a parent of a kid younger than 4 years old. I don't know, right? I said, would you mind if we put a group together? And she said, sure. I went and got 5 people who have been single parents or have had to parent at times by themselves together. And we got a group together. And you know what? They had a million better ideas than I ever would. So you could say I should have that coaching session with her because I'm her boss. But I didn't have enough experience to really help her. And by getting a group of people together and talking about what she was struggling with, they had all these wonderful ideas. The power of the group could solve the problem. Also, those people knew that she needed help and assistance, and they were able to empathize with her and check in with her and be willing to take on some of her workload sometimes when she was struggling, right? So there's a really huge power to being able to help people in different ways if we can get the group going. Also in a hybrid environment, because sometimes people are together in that office, we want to eliminate those little one-on-ones or one-on-twos that are only happening at the office and might be excluding people who are working from home that day or more often. So again, ask yourself that question. Who else might benefit from being on this call? If it's nobody and it's clearly you should only meet with that person, do that. That's okay. But if there's anyone else that could benefit from being on that call, for training, for education, because they're going to be impacted by these decisions, get them on the call. Get more people involved. Initially, you'll save yourself time and energy and anxiety or frustration later on. Any other questions, Rob?
Yeah, so I did have a couple, and then this chat just popped up, which I thought was interesting from Jenny. Was what about the dangers of groupthink? Like, time to make decisions or go through that whole process as well. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so when we bring people together in this sort of collaborative way, we're allowing them more space to be able to talk and to think about these issues, as opposed to bringing them into a larger setting less frequently, and we're sort of doing more of a webinar, right, where it's me talking to 20 people, and then we're getting into group thought. Now, group thought is huge. So let me give some strategies on how we coach people to deal with group thought. You need to make sure people know that they have permission to disagree. We need to demonstrate that we're going to be okay with them disagreeing. But we also need to give them tools. So there's a couple of tools we can give them. Number one, we can ask everyone to come to their own conclusion before they consider the conclusions of other people. Now that seems counterintuitive. Usually we say be open-minded. Open-minded should happen as the second thing we do. We want people to think about what their conclusions, what their answer is first, and then consider other options. Make sure they know they can ask what else we might do, what if we tried something else, or my favorite line is to give people is to say, hey, if you don't feel comfortable disagreeing, why don't you ask everyone, hey, would it be okay if I disagreed for a minute? You almost always get people go, oh, sure, we'd love to hear what you have to think, right? That helps us disconnect from that group thought area. Now, if you really need a great exercise, I learned this from David Marquet, his book, Turn the Ship Around. It's called Designating the Devil. Assign 2 people secretly in your 5 to 7 people meeting to be devil's advocate. It's their job to disagree with everything, right? And you will find that if 1 or 2 people start disagreeing with things, even if it's just being devil's advocate, other people feel safe and comfortable to disagree. So we have to be very intentional. We have to put in mechanisms to fight against group thought, right? If you're the leader and everyone's agreeing with you all the time, group thought is happening and you need to do a better job to undo it.
Very cool. Thank you. Maybe one more question, then want to and see how much other content you want to get through. But it was from Val, just around some of these meeting protocols. Was they're powerful, but are they germane to hybrid working per se? Any thoughts on that?
No. So I mean, as the question, can we use these strategies in a traditional office as well? Is that the question, Rob?
That's the way that I'm interpreting it.
Okay.
But Val, let me know if that's different.
Yeah. So yes, a lot of the things I'm suggesting today are curated for remote and hybrid work. Absolutely. Because we do work and meet differently when we're in a traditional office, right? If I walk in the door to an office and I see my boss standing there holding a dry erase pen and standing in front of a whiteboard in a conference room, waving me in, I know we're going to have a brainstorming meeting or we're going to talk about stuff, right? The cues are different there. We have to recreate these cues and signposts for our organizations when we are hybrid and remote so that we know when to work and how to work and when are we going to do these things. There are a lot of things you could use in any scenario, but the one-on-one meetings, that's another great example. If I'm in a traditional office and I know that Gary in IT has to talk to Susie in marketing. And once they do, then Susie and I can talk about this project. Well, I see him walk over to her office and I see them have a meeting. They have a one-on-one. Bing, now I know I can go in and talk to her about the next step. I saw the one-on-one happen. Or maybe I ran into him at lunch and he said, oh, by the way, I met with Susie. It's easier to know when to move to the next step. In hybrid and remote, that goes away because we're not seeing people physically move around an office. That's why we want to eliminate some of that stuff and recreate it in group settings so we can get that information moving around and help people know when to move on to the next thing. You're on.
Awesome. There's a lot of really good questions. I want to be sensitive to what else you want to share. So let's go there, and then I can definitely get.
I think I just got a little bit, and then we can definitely hit questions as much as we need to. So, yeah. So as I was talking about creating signposts, right? We want to make sure that people know in a hybrid and remote office, when do we check in? Is that a standing meeting every week? Is that a standing meeting every day? When do we check in with our team, with our group? Okay, that needs to be defined in a much more significant way when we have flexible work. When do we collaborate? Again, I give you the example of if my boss is standing there in front of a whiteboard, I know what's going to happen. We have to change that. We have to know, maybe, we call a special meeting that's the collaboration meeting. Maybe we use a certain language so people know this is a meeting where we're going to talk about ideas. This is, again, how we fight against group thought. We're intentionally coming together to talk about this stuff. When do we brainstorm? When are we going to be creative? Are we going to have a new idea Friday meeting? Are we going to, what does that look like? How does the organization design that? When do we blow off steam? When is it cool to just show up and talk about stupid stuff? You know what I mean? Like what our vacation is, or, where we're going, or what our kids' soccer team is doing, or are we coaching? And, when do we talk about all this other stuff? That you need to figure that out so it doesn't find its way into other areas it shouldn't. Maybe there's a specific time. Maybe it's always the last 10 minutes of a meeting. I mean, you guys design it how you want, but it needs to be intentional. And then when do we fill in the blank for anything else that's important for your organization? So create these signposts so you know what to do. All right. So what other questions did we have, Rob? That's it for the content. I put the link up for the book there in case anyone missed that. And I know we are sending out the PDF of this deck as well. I think that question came up.
All right, great. Sounds good. So there were a couple around some of the late, kind of more, I guess, conceptual questions, but there was one earlier around the 3 factors of success and conflict and some of the conversations of teams. And the question from Brian said, these sound like they're for specialized project teams, but what about core established departments? And I think I remember you saying that it's kind of relevant for both, but wanted to see if you had any other thoughts around the differences between a project team versus a ever-standing department.
So I call those, an infinite team, which would be a standing team. My sales team is always going to be a sales team, my customer service, that kind of thing. I think for those groups, it's a little bit easier because what is success, what is failure, and what are our conflict strategy? Those tend to have to be a little bit more in place, or them a little bit better because it's the same people for a longer period of time, but they should still be defined, right? If I go to the sales team and ask, what is your conflict strategy? How do you guys deal with conflict? They should know what that is. Maybe they learned it over time because they just experienced it, because it's the same group, but they should know that. They should know what their goals are. What is our sales goal this year? What does that big, goal look like? What does success look like? And what does failure look like? So yes, it's just as important for both groups. I think it's a little easier in the infinite groups. It's even more important in the finite groups. And that's where we find groups falling apart because they came together for something special, for a one time or for a short period of time. And if they didn't get those things figured out, then that's when teams tend to fail. That's when one person does all the work and everybody else just sort of passive aggressively didn't help or didn't contribute. It's really important if we want everyone to be successful. And again, that's what Google found was those most successful, especially those project teams, figured those 3 things out. And they met their goals, or they overachieved every time.
Okay, great. So there's 2 questions that I think they're big questions, but I want to kind of put them together. And one says, what is the best way to lead into remote work employees who still would like to work at an office? And it was coupled with another question that says, can you speak to best practices when some colleagues are in the office and others are remote on any given day? So let me know if that makes sense to combine those, or you could separate them. But
yeah, I think the combined answer is, if you treat hybrid work as if it's remote work, that's my simplest, best advice. So what does that mean? Well, if you have some people in the office and some people at home, no matter who they are, right? If everyone logs on to their Zoom or their Teams or whatever you use, everyone's logging on and treating it as if everyone was working in a different location, you'll have your best chance for success. We're all on an equal playing field. We're all on the same platform. We're all logging in as individual people, right? The subset of that would be, okay, maybe the 3 people in the office that day are in a conference room and they're bringing in on video, and they're on video, all 3 of them, and they're bringing in the other 2 people on video. I like the first example better because everyone, again, is on the same playing field. At least in the second example, everyone is still together. We can see each other. Everyone is seeing body language. Everyone can smile at each other, and we're collaborating. Okay. And we want to avoid that when that meeting ends, those 3 people start having a sub meeting, right? When that meeting ends, the meeting ends. Treat it as if we are all working remotely. If we need to keep talking, well, let's have another meeting and bring everybody in. And that just needs to be flushed out, talked about, discussed why that's important. Make sure everyone understands that we can't have these little side conversations. Or if you do, if that has to happen, that you document it, you go back and say, hey, maybe on Slack, right after the meeting, John and Susie and I had another side conversation. Here's what we talked about. Here's what we discussed. Let us know if you want to have another call, or if that was okay. So just being really transparent about all of that.
Okay, great. I think a lot of us are struggling with this now. I really like this question, and there's so many, so do our best to get to them all. But it says it's challenging to move a traditional organization into thinking a more, modern way, and how to make them see value in changing their approach is the question. Any thoughts or anecdotes or data around that?
Yeah, I mean, take the McKinsey study, right? From a retention strategy, we know that your best people are going to leave if you don't offer it. So that's going to force their hand a little bit. There's a lot of research if you do remote work, productivity. There's a lot of studies and articles out there that have shown that people working from home, having flexible work, they've actually had increase in productivity, right? We're seeing more time being spent in CRMs and making calls and doing all this stuff because they're not spending 2 hours commuting, right? They're not spending all this time driving into an office and driving home and going to have to get on planes all the time to go see clients and go to different locations. The fact that we've upped our game in being able to collaborate with people effectively and efficiently on these different platforms allows us to be far more productive and effective, but also gives us some of our work-life balance back. So people feel like they're being more productive, they're more engaged. We do have to really worry about burnout. I talked about when we started how remote was all it, and then hybrid's now the big topic. The next one coming is about how burnt out people are. Because we're gonna have to really think about how we help them create better boundaries, and that will happen. But if you need good data and good fodder, I don't think there's anything stronger than your best people are going to leave, and look, people are doing more work because they're home. You're eliminating so many complexities for them. And then you have reductions in costs. There's lots of other sub factors to there as well. But those are the great ones to start with.
That's it. I mean, you mentioned kind of the next phase being kind of eliminating burnout, and I'm not sure if that's, your organization's been remote, for probably since its inception, but any thoughts on how to reduce burnout or kind of approach it with the right mindset or considerations?
Yeah, so definitely a couple things that I suggest people start with. So the first one is this little funny saying that's, if you're wired, you're fired. And what I mean by that is, if you take the day off, if you go on vacation, I do not want to see you answering an email, popping into Slack, hopping on a conference call. If you took the day off, if it was important for you to have a day off or to do something or go on vacation, I want you completely disengaged from work. So I tell them, if you're wired, you're fired. If you're wired into us somehow, you're in big trouble, right? Make the clean break. We can handle it. We'll get you updated when you come back, okay? But you have to set this. I talked about being the dictator of meetings and things like that. You have to be the dictator about this stuff as a leader and be really clear to people. I value your time. I value it so much. And I want you to have clean breaks between work and not work, that I'm going to tell you, do not show up when you're not working. Do not, if you're off, you're off. If you're on, you're on, right? And be very clear about that. We'll get you caught up. The only exception to that rule is I have had salespeople who've been working on a deal for 2 years. It's a huge thing. It's going to make their quota for the year. And yeah, if they're on vacation and that lead suddenly has to have a meeting right then, they're going to close the deal. Yes, we've allowed them on and that's okay. And we've actually given them like an extra vacation day or whatever to make up for it. But like, they don't want to lose this giant $1 million deal just because they were on vacation. Okay, fine, right? But otherwise, we can handle anything else that comes up. The second thing that's really important, if anyone goes on vacation, more than a day, several days, 3-4 days, or maybe a week, 2 weeks, if they go on vacation, they must, on the moment, their first act coming back to the office is to have what we call an ostrich meeting with their boss and their team, which is help me get caught up, help me get my head out of the sand, fill me in 15 minutes, fill me in with anything I missed so I can get caught up very quickly, right? Move information around very quickly. And they pull up their email program and their boss watches them do Control A, completely grab all of their email and delete everything. We go inbox 0 the day they come back from vacation. Inbox 0.
Having a panic attack just listening to that.
Right. Now, we highly encourage that they put an outgoing message that says, I'm not going to read your email. It will not be received. If you need to reach me, please resend your email after this date, because I'm going to be gone from here to here. Here's some other people you can contact in the organization if you need help. I find this is the single best eliminator of anxiety and stress and overwork, because people don't want to get behind on their emails. So what do? They're working while they're on vacation, or they don't take vacation, or they don't take days off because they know they're going to come back to 300, 400, 5,000 emails, and that is just a daunting, anxiety-filled thing. So if they know they have permission to tell people to resend their email, they know their boss is going to make them go inbox 0. It is the most liberating, freeing experience to come back, and it's 0 the moment you start back. I'm also, by doing that, you're setting the expectation, everyone. We value your time off. We want you to create boundaries. We don't want you to overwork. We don't want you to burn out here. And you will find that they're more willing to stand up to say, I need to stop at this time. I can't get you this report today. I can get it to you by tomorrow morning. My son has a class, has an appointment, has a thing. People start willing to draw boundaries a little bit better when they see that leadership is helping them create the boundaries for themselves.
Awesome. Now I'm sad that there's 14 questions and we definitely can't get through them all with how much time we have. And I think you've answered a couple of them here and there, and some of those ideas and examples. Thank you. Those are really good ideas. One, I'm trying to find a question that we didn't touch on yet. And this one was about how are you finding remote work showing up for marginalized groups? So remote work has been shown to amplify exclusionary behaviors. Any thoughts on that question?
So we have seen some of that pop up, right, in the research and in the news, that some of that bad behavior stuff has been happening because there's less light on that. I will say I think that's because the organization itself already had a bad culture, or you already had bad habits, that when you put people in these new environments under total anxiety, and you COVID and a pandemic, and you're not allowed to see other people, right? We saw behaviors get worse. If we remove the pandemic part, right, and we're just working remotely, flexibly, hybrid, I find that actually goes away. And if we're working in our groups and things like that, we have better outcomes. We have people who are exhibiting better behavior. Where remote and hybrid work actually can help you in other ways is to be able to hire people that are a better reflection of what your organization wants. We can hire more diverse people, whether that is diversity from a gender standpoint, from a racial standpoint, could be from a neurodiverse standpoint, right? There are people, I've hired people that could never be in an office. They could never handle it, both from an anxiety, maybe they're dealing with anxiety, maybe they're on the Asperger's scale, maybe they have, just whatever's going on with them. Being in a busy, loud office could never work for them. But I could hire them and they could work from their home, they could be on their meetings and they could handle it. And they were fantastic employees, right? So I can hire people from lots of different places. You may say, we would love to hire more of a more diverse group from a racial standpoint. But in our city, it's very hard for us to do that. Our city, where we can hire from in our, where our office is located, it's really a challenge. If you can hire anywhere in the world or anywhere in your country or anywhere on your continent, you have a much bigger talent pool to be able to go get different people. You will remove that location bias. So you should be able to, over the long haul, influence that, eliminate those people that are not who you want and bring in better people who you are, because you have a bigger, better talent pool to do that.
Awesome. Again, I want to be really, really respectful of your time. I know it's a couple of minutes past the hour, so we could probably do a part 2 webinar and answer 13 questions and other ones that come. So apologies to people that we didn't get to all your questions. I want to kind of record them and see if there's some way we can add light to it. But
Sure.
But with that being said, Chris, a big thank you for your time, effort, and thoughts. You have a lot going on with a new book being released. Appreciate you spending time with us today. And just a big thank you. And to everyone on the call that joined us in the community, have a good rest of the day as well. It's remote work. I don't even know what day it is, Thursday. Enjoy your Thursday and Friday and a great weekend. And take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.